The Columbia Police Department has a community problem. Some residents don't trust police. In 2015, the CPD began an initiative to improve community relations. This has been the goal for almost 20 years. The most recent training program, called Fair and Impartial Policing, takes a scientific approach to teach officers about bias.
Diversity training is great, where you recognize the differences in people and where they're from. Fair and impartial policing is more on, I'm here, I'm going to deal with a diverse crowd. How do I make sure that internally I'm acting on the law, safety tactics, and being just in my application?
But for minority families in Columbia, conversations about the police are often still cautionary. Tony Parker remembers the day his nephew, a black 17-year-old, asked if he would get shot if he was pulled over by the police. Parker's been an officer for the CPD for 4 years. He told his nephew,
You have to listen. You know, if you listen, I think things will go smooth every single time. If someone tells you to put your hands on the steering wheel, then put your hands on the steering wheel. And I have to tell my young nephew this, you know, because I don't want him to do something he's not supposed to do and get shot.
Parker believes the CPD is a strong department, making progress in community relationships. But the concerns he has for his nephew come from what he sees happening nationwide. The Center for Policing Equity in Los Angeles collects data on police departments nationwide. The organization found racial inequity in policing happens in cities all across the country. That's exactly what Columbia Police are trying to combat. But community opinion on officer relationships varies greatly depending on the individual. Aaron Favors is close friends with several CPD officers, but even he has slight concerns.
Regardless who my friends are and what kind of relationship that I have with them, I do believe that bias exists. I believe that it thrives depending on who you are and your background and what contact you have with the group that you form these biases against.
Favors believes positive relationships are possible, but Andrea Johnson takes a more critical view. Her son CJ has had repeated run-ins with the police. He since has left town to avoid what he sees as further bias.
And it's sad. And no, we're wasting our money on training. All of this stuff is set in stone.
Some community members, like Johnson, feel that after a long history of failed reforms, the Columbia Police Department is still doing nothing to help community relations. But Sergeant Hester sees it differently.
So the public is starting to feel like, hey, they're looking at me as an individual, or they're looking at this situation based on the facts, and that's all we can ever hope for from a police force. I think that would. So we're getting good feedback on that.
Recently, CPD has held several meetings to introduce the public to their reform training and get feedback. But building community relationships is a process, and seeing results will take time. With producers Hannah Sandfeld, Char'Nese Turner, and Miko Kian, Allie Pecorin, KBIA News, Columbia.